perspective by Bharat Prakashan, the publisher of Organiser and Panchajanya Weeklies, and the group of intellectuals called Jigyasa. The idea of this program, of course, came from Shri Rajkumar Bhatia ji. Though we were deliberating on this kind of event for a long time. Hindu phenomenon and media, I deliberate legions of Indian media who actually changed the discourse related to a rise of Hindutva movement and its representation in media. Shri Girilal Jain, I believe many of you may be aware, but the people from present generation, many a times actually do not have any immediate memory of such icons, maybe K.R. Malkani ji, Girilal Jain, or Ram Swarup ji, many such stalwarts who actually shaped the entire intellectual discourse related to Hindutva and gave it a new direction. Why it is now? Of course, one occasion is today's birth anniversary of Shri Girilal Ji. But we all know, his birth centenary is also coming. But we are also on the verge of seeing one a sort of epochal event after 492 years of struggle. That context, remembering Girilal Ji becomes very crucial. A person coming from a very humble rural background, creating his own space in media as chief editor of Times of India, and then unceremoniously had to leave just because of taking position on this particular issue. And then the way he shaped in next 4-5 years about this entire discourse. Before handing over the things to and inviting our speakers, I will just read out 2 paragraphs from Girilal Ji's writings. He contributed in Sunday Mail, which will tell you why it is so important. Limits of the Hindu Rashtra is one column he had written, and he starts, the Ram Janambhoomi Babri dispute has brought to the fore the critical issue of the nature of the Indian state, as nothing else has since partition and independence in 1947. The separatist versus Hindu Rashtra controversy is, of course, not new. In fact, it has been with us since the 20s, when some of our forebears began to search for a definition of nationalism which could transcend at once the Hindu-Muslim divide and the aggregationist approach whereby India was regarded as a Hindu-Muslim Sikh-Christian land, but it has acquired an intensity it has not had since partition. Another important, quote from his similar kind of piece, where he clearly states the Indian state in independent India has in true sought, broadly speaking, to be neutral in the matter of religion, but this is a surface view of the reality. Now, this was a bold kind of argumentation that time, and Swapanda is the best person to throw a light why this is so important. But what he mentions about the Ram Janambhoomi movement. For the first time in 1,000 years, Hindus got in 1947 an opportunity to resolve the civilizational issue in the only manner such issues can be resolved. History clearly of one civilization alone produces the necessary condition for the assimilation of another. Two changes, as any student of Arab conquest of Christian Syria and Egypt in 7th century would know. But that is how civilizations grow. And uh, he believes that, the failure of Indian elite, not just the political class, but the intellectual elite, to their ability to grasp this opportunity in 1947 itself was a major failure. Ram Janambhoomi movement provided that opportunity. That is the kind of argument that very um, clearly and articulately Girilal Ji made. And with this background, we thought that it would be appropriate to remember Girilal Ji and his contribution, and correlate it to the present context when we are again deliberating the same issues, though in a different way. We have with us Shri Swapan Gupta. He needs no introduction, a very acclaimed author, columnist, and of course now Rajya Sabha MP. I welcome him in this program. We also have Shri Tarun Vijayji, a very outspoken editor, truly representing Girilal Ji's legacy. He is one person who was, responsible for, bringing Girilal Ji in contact with Organiser and Panchajanya, and he took special efforts to translate his columns in Hindi and publish it. So his experiences, his insights would be very helpful at this juncture. Another important person and close associate of Girilal Ji was K.N. Gupta. He was associated with Organiser and Motherland, both the publications published by Bharat Prakashan. But he later went to Economic Times, Times of India, and he was also involved in the sort of journalist union, and he is still, even today at this age, he is very active and guiding young journalists. He was again a very important person who opened a window sort of in bringing Girilal Ji to introducing to the then leadership of Hindutva movement. Though Girilal Ji representing the intellectual space, there were people who were in the activist mode. There K.N. Gupta played a very important role. And of course, Sandhya Jain is there. Meenakshi Ji and Sandhya Ji, they are now known faces, one in journalism, the other in history writing. In fact, Meenakshi Ji, I also wanted her to be here today, but unfortunately, she already had committed for another program with Indic Academy. But she and her research has played a critical role in, shaping the entire case related to the decision on Ram Janambhoomi case. But Sandhya Ji is there, and Sandhya Ji would definitely share her experiences about the father and the editor, and a very interesting journey and the kind of influence he has created about what Sandhya ji is doing today. So with this introduction, I would like to invite Swapanda to start the deliberation. The idea is, each speaker will speak for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we will open the session for discussion or question, or maybe some ideas that can be thrown how to take this intellectual legacy forward. There are many people who are watching this on live on our organizers YouTube channel also. So we might get some questions from that route as well. So over to you, Swapanda. And because now recently you have shared your experience about writing something in 2013 in Telegraph, and that the experience of Girilal haunts many. You should really throw how Hindu phenomenon and media has, and what was Girilal Ji's role in this entire process. Over to you, Swapanda.
Dhanyavad, Professor Ji. Namaskar to everybody who's come. I've spoken in Jigyasa before, and I'm very glad to be able to speak once again in this forum. I'm so glad in a way that you've decided to have a meeting on Girilal Jain. Giri was truly a phenomena in more ways than one. He had a very distinct, very expansive personality. He was an editor of the old school who cared more about ideas than sometimes about the nitty-gritty, the nuts and bolts of journalism. That was a tradition which unfortunately we have lost. But more than that, Giri was someone who was fascinated by ideas. And what I found very interesting about Giri was that his ability to absorb ideas, expand them, put them out into the popular domain, use the Times of India as a platform for intellectual dissemination. These were qualities which we all recognize about Girilal Jain. The fact that ideas mattered in society was something which was very central to his being. And when it came to his own intellectual bearings, he moved. He shifted quite a lot. Giri began, or at least when I first got to know him, was a person who was very much molded in the old sense of the Congress establishment. A Congress establishment which combined the idea of a strong Indian state with the traditions of Indian nationalism. He often felt he epitomizes and he represented and was there, that his divine duty was to give a voice, a certain coherence to this establishment. That to give them a direction and tell them what their historic role is. So in that sense, he began very much as a part of the old Congress establishment. But then over the years, a man who was always receptive to ideas, he moved quite substantially. And I think what moved him more than anything else was post the Rajiv Gandhi experience, where he saw a certain decay in the Indian establishment, a loss of direction, and that he always linked to larger global features. that there were 4 pillars on which the old Nehruvian consensus, as he used to call it, rested on. One was the idea of socialism. One was non-alignment. One was secularism. And I forget what the 4th was. But I mean, these were the 3 pillars on which it stood. And with the fall, the disintegration of the Soviet Union, 2 of these pillars naturally eroded. One was the intellectual hegemony of socialism. The second, the idea of non-alignment, which started disintegrating. And he felt that it was only a matter of time before the 3rd pillar on which the Nehruvian consensus rested on, which is secularism, was to erode, was going to give way. And that there would be a fundamental redefinition of both the Indian establishment and of the Indian state. Now, Giri was unique in a lot of ways. The common consensus in those days among people who called themselves nationalists, whether they were of the Congress persuasion or they called themselves Hindu nationalists or what have you, was that partition was a very unfortunate development in this country. Giri disagreed. Giri located partition in the truncation of the Hindu civilization right from the 11th century AD, when the Shaivite kingdoms of Afghanistan fell to the conquering Muslim armies. And he said that since the 11th century, the space for what we can loosely call Hindu civilization had begun shrinking. And to him, partition signified that process. But he also saw it in another way. He said, for the first time in about nearly 1,000 years, the Hindus have got their own state. They may not realize it, but they have got their own state. After a series of defeats, consecutive defeats, they have got their own state. And in this context, he saw, and it was a very evocative use in a very evocative imagery which he had. He saw the old Babri structure. He said that represented the ambiguity of India's present existence. The ambiguity was because here was something which was nominally a mosque, in reality was a functioning temple, and which had to give way for a real temple. And in that sense, he said what was happening, what the existential dilemmas of India could be epitomized in what was happening in this particular shrine in Ayodhya. And I think that was a very vivid imagery, because it was not merely a quest for building a temple, reclaiming a site which had been lost, but it was actually, in one sense, the foundations, the creation, the urge to create a new type of state, a new type to get the nation to realize its own self, and in the process, which he had always the thing, create a new form of establishment which had to be intellectual, which had to be intellectually equipped for this mission. The last project was particularly dear to him because all the time, and he used to often say this in private conversation, He said he used to believe that those who fought for Hindu nationalism in the past weren't so aware that their activist tradition was probably more pronounced than their intellectual tradition. And he said this imbalance, unless this imbalance is rectified, we will suffer defeats. And that was Giri's thing. And he made it his mission, particularly in the last years of his life. What I find very interesting is that really Giri came into its own, as if it was some sort of a flower which was blooming. And when it came into full bloom, it was really in the last years of his life when he was at his most creative and provocative best. Because that's when he challenged. He challenged existing ideas, he dared people, and he provoked. It was not a very popular thing to do in those days, but he felt that there was a certain tide, and he always viewed things in a very larger historical context. And he saw it in that way, that here was something new about to emerge from the debris of the something old. And that was very clear to him. And that's why he took the idea of journalism, he took opinion writing in journalism, and remember, Giri only wrote one book. Because most of his writings are to be found in columns and those sort of things, because he was at his best. He was expressing his ideas through that. And with that, he created a certain space. It mattered quite a lot to people at that time, that here was a man who was a complete pillar of the old establishment, the editor of the Times of India, no less. Giri was often made a passing comment that that's the second most important job in India. A lot of people laughed at that and made fun of it. But the point is, he saw himself in that role as a certain pillar, the intellectual pillar of an old establishment. For that sort of a person to come over and challenge the very assumptions on which that establishment was based was, to my mind, a profound intellectual earthquake as far as India is concerned. Subsequently, in years to come, when the history of this movement, the history of this churning, as I call it, is written, and you can only really write a history probably 50 years later, a proper history, when you have the benefit of hindsight. Giri will feature very, very prominently, and probably one of the most foremost, as one of the pioneers who put a content, who shaped the content, who gave it a certain direction, and who shaped the thinking of a lot of people. Personally, I can say my intellectual debt to him is immense. I wish he had been younger, that he had had a few more years which he could contribute. But even in those years, these last years when he was at its most creative best, he's created enough of a gamut of writing to be able for subsequent generations to chew on, to think over. The other day, someone asked me whether I could get him a copy of the Hindu Phenomena. I have one copy, and I said, I'm not parting with it. But I wish that a reprint of that is possible. Reprint of some of his articles in the last days is collated and published on the occasion of his centenary. that would be a tribute to a man who I think played an enormous role in shaping or guiding the direction in which I believe India is moving. With these words, I'll wait for questions and all that. Dhanyavad, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to pay tributes and give my own personal uh, tribute to a man who I think has played a very, very significant role in my own intellectual development. Dhanyavad.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Swapanda, for sharing that in a way a personal experience, but still technically speaking, from a royist to a close supporter of the, especially Indira Gandhi regime, and then to a of especially Ram Janambhoomi movement. तरुण जी, आपने इस ट्रांजिशन के गिरिलाल जी को आपने क्लोजली देखा, पांचजन्य में उनसे लिखवाया भी। मैं आपसे निवेदन अभी करूंगा कि इस सारे ट्रांजिशन को और उस कंट्रीब्यूशन को, उस समय की उनकी राइटिंग्स और उसमें इंटेलेक्चुअल स्पेस में उसकी भूमिका को लेकर आप इसको कैसे देखते हैं, आपके अनुभव कृपया शेयर करें। I think you have to unmute, Tarun ji.
Thank you. Thank you, Praful ji, for giving me this opportunity to share my views, especially listening to Swapanda. And I know that Girilal ji had a very special liking for Swapanda. You speak good things about him on those days. And that was the early 90s. I got a call from Ram ji that would you please call Girilal ji? He wants to speak to you and he wants to write something for you. And that was a shock for me because Girilal ji, we always looked at him with an awe, and he was the greatest icon of the editors institution even those days. And once I remember perhaps Ram Ji or Sitaram ji said that he's the last lamppost on the path of editors institution. So there was this triumvirate, the Trimurti of Sitaram Goel ji, Ram Swarup ji, and Girilal ji. That guided that gave the intellectual prowess and strength to the Hindu movement. And they were also very critical of many of the things of the Hindu movement as not as an outsider, but as an insider who liked that Hindu movement must move faster, stronger, and in the right direction. So those were their days when these kind of giants, the intellectual giants like Ram Swarup ji, Sitaram ji, and Girilal ji were there. And I worked for Panchjanya for 27 years continuously. Out of that 20 years, I was the chief editor. And I had the privilege and honor to interact with all the three. All the three had visited Panchjanya on one occasion or the other. And we were very fortunate to publish even the writings of Ram Swarupji would write exclusively for Panchjanya. Sitaramji would write, and I would go to his home. And I remember that when Lajja was published first time in Bangladesh by Taslima Nasri, he said that it will be good if Panchjanya serializes Lajja in Hindi. And Sitaramji especially translated Lajja for Panchjanya. And Panchjanya was the first newspaper in the country to serialize Lajja continuously in Hindi. So I went to, after Ramsarupji's call, I called him his Gulmohar Park residence. And I very vividly remember I was very nervous. I didn't know that what to say. But he was very affectionate, a fatherly figure. And he said that I want to write for Panchjanya. So that was a shock. And I said that, पर गिरिलाल जी हमें तो खुशी होगी पर इसकी क्या वजह क्या है. तो उन्होंने कहा कि देखो इस समय जो फिनोमेना चल रहा है वो अंग्रेजी वालों की समझ में इतना नहीं आना चाहिए, उनकी समझ में आना चाहिए, जो हिंदी वाले, जो भारतीय भाषा वाले। मेरी बात जब तक हिंदी के माध्यम से लोगों तक नहीं पहुंचेगी तब तक लोग इसको समझेंगे नहीं। और ये सामान्य फिनोमेना नहीं है, यह इतिहास का बहुत बड़ा एक मोमेंट है। That's the reason I want to write in Hindi. But how do I write? I don't write in Hindi. So I said that I'll be privileged if I come every week to you. I will bring my tape recorder. I will ask a couple of questions. And when I transcribe it, I will take out the questions out and it will take a shape of an article at your column. And that will be the first edit page column, which we used to call Disha Darshan. The editor would write it, but now Girilal Ji was given that space. So every week I would spend almost an hour and a half or more with the samosas and chais from Mataji. So the things that he would emphasize. First thing is that he didn't care for the government, he didn't care for the big leaders, he didn't care for the big names, he didn't care for who is what. His only commitment was for the Hindu cause and for India. He had friends across the borders, across the boundary lines, and he had a scant respect for the fake intellectuals. They were there in the Hindu side, they were there on the secular side. And he won't mince his words. He was very harsh on them. And he said that unless you understand the basic importance and significance of this phenomena, you won't be able to lead it. No movement can survive in history or has survived in the history if the intellectual engines are not provided to it at the right time, in the right direction. A movement which doesn't have an intellectual input, which does not have that intellectual prowess, which does not have the intellectual engine, goes wayward very soon, and you will lose the historical moment. For Ayodhya was that time a matter of huge heat and discussion and tumult, and he was the first person who said that nobody should be feeling ashamed at the Babri structure's demolition. And his words in Panchajanya were, देखो पिछली एक जो सहस्राब्दी रही है, मिलेनियम रहा है, वह भारत में हिंदू मंदिरों के विध्वंस और हिंदुओं के नरसंहार से प्रारंभ हुआ। यह जो मिलेनियम है, यह हिंदू मंदिरों के पुनरुद्धार, हिंदू मंदिरों के पुनरोदय, हिंदू मंदिरों के पुनर्निर्माण से प्रारंभ हो रहा है। ये एक मिलेनियम का फर्क है, इसको समझना जरूरी है। और इसके लिए किसी एक संगठन या किसी एक नेता को श्रेय देना ठीक नहीं है। ये वातावरण जब बनता है तभी मूवमेंट शुरू हो सकता है। अगर वातावरण ठीक नहीं बना है तो कितना भी आप मूवमेंट चलाने की कोशिश करें, वह मूवमेंट कभी भी जड़ नहीं पकड़ेगा और वह मूवमेंट कभी गति नहीं पकड़ेगा। तो इसलिए जो आपसे पहले लोग हुए हैं जिन्होंने इस वातावरण को बनाने में दसियों साल, 20 साल, 100 साल लगाए हैं, उन सब का एक्यूमुलेटेड नतीजा है राम जन्मभूमि मूवमेंट। ये किसी एक संगठन या नेता की देन नहीं है। और वो जो एक्यूमुलेटेड ये हिंदू ज्वार है, इसको मान्य करना ही हिंदू मूवमेंट के लिए बहुत आवश्यक होगा। और उन्होंने कहा कि भारत का जो स्वरूप है वह मूलतः हिंदू राष्ट्र का है। हिंदू राष्ट्र इसलिए नहीं होता है कि यहाँ हिंदू मेजोरिटी में होते हैं। हर एक देश का एक चेहरा होता है, हर एक देश की एक आत्मा होती है। एवरी नेशन हैज अ फेस एंड अ सोल। अगर यहाँ हिंदू मेजोरिटी में नहीं भी होंगे तब भी यह देश हिंदू देश ही कहा जाएगा और इस देश की हिंदू देश के अलावा और कोई पहचान नहीं हो सकती है। दूसरी उन्होंने कहा कि यह समय हिंदू पुनर्जागरण का है। उन्होंने कहा कि आई वुड रादर गो फॉर द वर्ड रिजुवनेशन, नॉट अ रिवाइवल। और यह वो समय है जब आपको रेडिकल चेंजेस करने होंगे। अगर आप रेडिकल चेंजेस अपने समाज में नहीं करेंगे तो ये मूवमेंट नष्ट हो जाएगा और आप इतिहास में हिंदू समाज को परिवर्तन करने का यह समय खो देंगे। और रेडिकल मूवमेंट में चेंजेस में उनका एक बहुत बड़ा जोर होता था कि जो कास्ट है इस पर विशेष रूप से आपको बल देना है। समझो, ये कास्टिज्म और जो कास्ट के आधार पे जिस प्रकार का वितंडावाद फैलाया जाता है, जिस प्रकार का एक तमाशा खड़ा किया जाता है, जिस प्रकार से भेदभाव भी होता है, यह हिंदू समाज में कभी रहा नहीं है। उन्होंने मुझे एक किताब पढ़ने के लिए दी थी और वह किताब का नाम था नौकर, सिपाही एंड राजपूत। एक जर्मन थे, उनकी यह पुस्तक थी, DR क्वेफ करके, H क्वेफ, ये उनका नाम था। और इसमें उन्होंने एथनो हिस्ट्री ऑफ मिलिट्री लेबर मार्केट ऑफ हिंदुस्तान 1450 टू 1850 इसका उन्होंने एनालिसिस किया। यह पुस्तक देते हुए उन्होंने कहा कि तुम जो हिंदू मूवमेंट के लोग हो, उनका इंटेलेक्चुअल से और रिसर्च से कोई संबंध नहीं है या बहुत कम संबंध है, और ये तुम्हारे विनाश का एक कारण बनेगा। आप अपने इतिहास के बारे में शोध नहीं करना चाहते, आप अपने इतिहास के बारे में जानना नहीं चाहते, आप अपने इतिहास के बारे में केवल पश्चिमी देशों के विद्वानों पर निर्भर करते हैं। कभी भी कोई बात होगी इस देश की प्राचीनता के बारे में, धार्मिकता के बारे में, सामाजिकता के बारे में, आक्रमणकारियों के बारे में, तो आप अमेरिकन, ब्रिटिश या किसी भी वेस्टर्न रिसर्चर की किताब लेके आएंगे। क्यों नहीं आप पिछले 60 साल में, 70 साल में ऐसे इंस्टीट्यूशंस और ऐसे लोग पैदा कर सकते जो उन कारणों पे जाएंगे जिनके कारणों से भारत बार बार आक्रमणों का शिकार हुआ, गुलाम हुआ, प्रतिरोध की स्थिति में आया, और उन कारणों के निवारण का क्या समाधान मार्ग हो सकता है। इसके बारे में हिंदू मूवमेंट बेहद एक कमजोर मूवमेंट है। और कई बार उन्होंने कहा, छोड़ो, तुम लोग इंटेलेक्चुअल्स को सहन नहीं कर सकते, तुम उनको ले नहीं सकते। और इस पुस्तक को देखकर उन्होंने लगभग 2 कॉलम लिखवाए थे कि भारत में जाति की जो सत्यता है वह वो नहीं है जो आज हम समझते हैं। आज एक व्यक्ति वणिक है, बनिया है, वह कल को राजपूत हुआ, परसों को उसने शूद्र का भी व्यवहार किया और उसकी नौकरी में लगा। तो एक ही व्यक्ति के इसमें अनेक उदाहरण हैं इस पुस्तक में, जिसकी जाति का परिवर्तन एक ही उसके जीवन काल में हुआ, और ये पूरे फैक्चुअल तथ्यों के साथ में इसमें दिया गया था। तो उन्होंने कहा था ये है, कभी कोई जन्मना या जो एक जाति का हो गया उसी में हमेशा जिएगा और मरेगा, ऐसा कभी यह माना नहीं गया। जाति का परिवर्तन उसके जीवन काल के विभिन्न कामों के हिसाब से होता रहा था। दूसरा, उन्होंने इस बात पे जोर दिया था कि हिंदुओं में पराक्रम और हिम्मत, जो वैरियर होना है, यह बहुत कमजोर हो गया है। Hindus have been basically warriors and globetrotters. उन दिनों मुझे याद है कि साइबेरिया में एक अग्नि मंदिर की खोज हुई थी, और 1200 साल पहले बताया गया था कि जाट वैद्य थे, वैद्य, वो वहाँ साइबेरिया थे और उनकी वहाँ पे पहचान बनी थी और उनके बारे में लिखा हुआ था उस अग्नि मंदिर में। तो मैंने उनको ये समाचार पढ़ाया था। तो उन्होंने कहा कि जाटों को कम पढ़ा लिखा बताना और उनकी मजाक उड़ाना, यह अंग्रेजों की और ईसाई मिशनरियों की देन है। जो जाट है भारत के, वे भारत के सबसे अधिक बुद्धिमान, तीव्र बुद्धि वाले और विश्व भ्रमण करने वाले लोग रहे हैं, जिनकी विभिन्न क्षेत्रों में बुद्धि का सारी दुनिया में एक सिक्का रहा है। लेकिन आप लोग इस बात को उभारते नहीं हैं। They are the best of the people, best of the intelligent and brilliant people. तो ये गिरिलाल जी के साथ हमारा लगभग ये 2-2.5 वर्ष का ये संबंध रहा, और उसमें हिंदी में जो उन्होंने लिखा, आर्यन थ्योरी के बारे में भी वो काफी तीव्रता से कहते थे, पर लेकिन उनका एक क्षोभ रहता था, जो क्षोभ सीताराम गोयल जी के मन में ज्यादा तीव्रता से प्रकट होता था, वो काफी तीखा लिख देते थे। पर गिरिलाल जी और राम स्वरूप जी क्षोभ को थोड़ा सरलता से बताते थे, लेकिन उनको दुख और क्रोध होता था कि आर्यन थ्योरी की सत्यता जो है वो आप लोग क्यों नहीं पढ़ाते हैं, आप लोग अपने स्कूलों में भी इसको नहीं पढ़ाते हैं। तो जब तक आप भारतीय भाषाओं में बौद्धिक संवाद और भारतीय भाषाओं में राष्ट्र के इंटेलेक्चुअल इनपुट्स देना प्रारंभ नहीं करें, तब तक आप इस देश में परिवर्तन नहीं ला सकते। मैं 5 जनवरी में क्यों लिख रहा हूँ? क्योंकि वे लोग जो अयोध्या में आंदोलन कर रहे हैं, वे लोग जो राम जन्मभूमि के आंदोलन में लगे हैं, उन तक ये बात पहुंचनी चाहिए, और ये बात मैं अंग्रेजी के अखबारों के माध्यम से नहीं पहुंचा सकता। यह कुछ चीजें रही हैं जिसका मुझे बहुत भली भांति स्मरण है, और मुझे विश्वास है कि उनकी जो हिंदी की हमने पुस्तक निकाली थी, सुरुचि साहित्य ने निकाली थी, उसकी एक प्रति मुझे मेरे पास होगी। हम उसका और बेहतर ढंग से, अच्छे ढंग से पुनः प्रकाशन इस शताब्दी वर्ष में कर पाएंगे। तो मैं अपनी ओर से भी और अपने सभी सहयोगियों की ओर से गिरिलाल जी को श्रद्धांजलि देते हुए वाणी को विराम देता हूँ और पुनः आपका आभार व्यक्त करता हूँ। नमस्कार।
धन्यवाद, धन्यवाद तरुण जी। ये जो आपने अंत में कहा कि ये एक इंटेलेक्चुअल एक्सरसाइज भी है, एक तरीके से स्ट्रगल भी, और उनका जो पेन था कि हिंदुत्व मूवमेंट इज नॉट वेरी कीन टू टेक दिस पेन ऑफ डेवलपिंग इंस्टीट्यूशनलाइज इंटेलेक्चुअल एक्सरसाइज। तो उस दिशा में भी इस बहाने हम कुछ आगे बढ़ पाए। एक इंटरव्यू उन्होंने द डेली को दिया था, उसमें उन्होंने कहा था, लेट मी टेल यू, आई एम नॉट अ ड्रीमर, I am not a utopian, I am an analyst. I analyze the correlation of forces and make certain assessment which is not backed by analysis of forces in play. I do not have a vision of Hindu India. I certainly do not have a blueprint for Hindu India. What I see is the disintegration of the existing order. Then I try to analyze the reasons responsible for it and indicate a possible solution. And to put it differently, an alternative model of development which may hopefully turn out to be more viable and healthier. Now, ये जो viable और healthier model की उनकी जो quest थी, उसको बहुत क्लोजली देखने वाले जर्नलिस्ट में उस समय के लॉट के ज्येष्ठतम जर्नलिस्ट में से एक, जिनका मदरलैंड, ऑर्गेनाइजर, इकोनॉमिक टाइम्स सबसे ये रहा, और जर्नलिस्ट एसोसिएशंस के साथ भी बहुत क्लोज संबंध रहा। अक्रॉस द आइडियोलॉजिकल स्पेक्ट्रम सबसे दोस्ती वो बनाते रहे। ऐसे के.एन. गुप्ता जी हमारे साथ है। आई वुड रिक्वेस्ट हिम टू share his experiences and tell us something about how we can take the legacy of Girilal Ji's forward. K.N. Gupta ji.
I have worked with many editors, from Frank Morris to Malkani ji, Rangnekar ji, Shamlal ji, and many others. But I found that Girilal Ji was a genuine editor, very popular among us, his staff. And that is why I was only a sub-editor in 1968. I had joined in 65, Times of India. And during that time, I was quite young and very junior. So I had interaction with him. He knew my background at RSS. I have come from RSS, joined Indian Express, and then now to Times of India. One day I asked him, well, we want to take you or invite you to Bharat Vikas Parishad, which was founded by Dr. Surat Prakash. You know, he was a very illustrious RSS leader. So he said, what will be there? I said, you are free. They want to invite you and talk to him. I was very happy that he agreed and delivered his address. Well, you know, in 1968, for the audience that he saw, they were listening to him very patiently, but were not clapping or cheering. as happens today. Naturally, he asked me, are these people understanding what I am saying? I said, very much, sir, but they are not in the habit of clapping and other things, but they have learned, and that is why they have put up many questions to you, and you have answered them. It was in 1968. So I want to say that he was open-minded as early as 68. He never thought that he's a big editor, that he should not go there. He doesn't know the organization. And I am inviting him. I am very small fry in that organization. But we were happy, and Vikas Parishad was very happy to interact with him. So this is, I want to tell you, that he was always open-minded, never had a closed mind. Of course, at the time, as you say, and many others say, the elite or intellectual class was, you say, either socialist, communist, but not rightist. But at the same time, you see, M.N. Roy, when he left Communist Party, so he had a lot of influence on intellectuals of that time. And I think many of journalists at that time were influenced by him. And Girilal Ji was one among them. So he was not a communist of that time. So far, that is about his thinking. And as an editor, he grew up in Times of India only, and he has, from the beginning to end, he became chief editor and behaved the same way with all his staff, and kept that momentum very well. Now, we know Mr. Shamlal's view, under whom he worked for a number of years, and he had great respect. We had a great respect for Shamlal Ji. He was a good writer, best editor, but he was left-minded. But there was no problem. Girilal Ji worked. Girilal Ji has all freedom. And as somebody has said, after Girilal Ji, I think this was the end of that era. The editors were not given that freedom, which till then management had given, not only to Times of India, but all other newspapers. I think we had the golden time. After that, the management tried to interfere and did interfere, as a result of which Mr. Giri was not very happy, and he left it. And I can only tell you that when we asked him after he has left Times of India, and he was reading, writing, and so many things, one day I asked him, after I retired from Economic Times, I asked him to write an article for us, Vana News Agency we were running. He said, "Look, I have left everything. I don't write. I am just devoted to Hindu scriptures. I only read them. I am no longer interested in writing and all these things. This is no use. I devote my whole attention to reading scriptures and understanding them." So he has altogether changed during the last days of his life. And as Tarunji has said, Dasgupta has said, that he's right. During those days, he was disillusioned with this media, so-called media at that time, and he has devoted all his time to reading scriptures, Hindu scriptures particularly. And as Tarunji has said, his earlier contact with Sitaramji Goel and Ram Sarup were revived, and they met together and worked for this. But I will say that the best editor that we came across was Mr. Girilal. Now I say, I have another thing, that he always wanted to live along or with intellectuals. He never, though he had many resources, he had many friends, but he chose to live among us in Gulmar Park, a journalist colony. Why? When he came over here and wanted to, you see, at the initial stage, he did not buy a plot like Mr. Shamlal, like Mr. Akshay Kumar Jain and other editors. He did not. But later, he decided to buy a plot in Gulmar Park, and we helped him. And he lived very happily and was very happy. Now, he could have selected any other post colony to live with, but it was his decision to live with intellectuals. And that is why we were meeting him often in Gulmore Park. And we were proud of him that he was interacting, unlike many other editors, with all kinds of people, all members of the journalist community. So this was his great thing. And when I asked him once to come to a NUJI, National Union of Journalists of India meeting, he agreed to go to as far as Haridwar. But unfortunately, he couldn't go because he had some illness at that time. So he could not go. What I say is that he was a very dear friend of the journalist community. We lost him very early. This is our regret. And that is, I think the journalist community has suffered because of early or premature death. And I have just to conclude that a person like Girilal Ji will not be born many times, and we will be deprived of such a personality. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing, those experiences. I think Tarunji wants to add something.
No, I just wanted to add something that you said, and Guptaji said that when he would speak about giving the intellectual leadership and engine to the Hindu movement, I would share that with Pani and Sudarshanji. And Sudarshanji, I have to discuss with him something very special. He took time and he went to see him with me at his Gulmore Park residence, and he was with Girilal Ji for more than 2 hours. They discussed in a very fine detail how RSS is working to create a Bauddhic Yodha, the intellectual warriors in various fields. And it was a very frank and very candid discussion. At the end of it, Girilal Ji was very happy and he said that I didn't know about all these activities that the Sangha people are doing all over India. And it is very necessary that you groom your youngsters in the basic Hindu ideological path, and they must be able to reply to the slanderous assaults on us by left and jihadis. ये हिंदू पुनरोदय का समय है, और इस हिंदू पुनरोदय के समय में अगर आप अपने नौजवानों को हिंदू थॉट के साथ मजबूत नहीं करेंगे, तो you will miss the bus. And Sudarshan ji was the best person. As a Sarsanchalak, he went to see him and had a long discussion. Perhaps 2 other times also he went to him and discussed things that were very useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Tarunji, for that addition. In one of his writings in 1990, he made one interesting remark. And before inviting Sandhya ji, I would like to, recite that because even today Sandhya ji represents that, anguish. He said, in the existing West-dominated political intellectual milieu, it is understandable that BJP leaders act defensively. But it is time they recognize that defensiveness can cripple them. And as they did in the past, when they sought respectably in claim of adherence to Gandhian socialism, whatever it might mean, and this time in a context favorable to them. I think this was, he was expecting more intellectually aggressive kind of, movement of, entire Hindutva thinking, and I'm sure this thought naturally influenced Sandhya ji as a daughter. So I invite Sandhya ji. Initially, she was very reluctant, but she said, as a daughter, I can speak, not as his contribution in intellectual or as an editor. So Sandhya ji, over to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I'll just give a little roundabout about my father. First thing I would like to say is, in response to what Swapan ji had said earlier, the Hindu phenomenon was republished by Voice of India, I think 2 years ago. And today somebody sent me a copy of the original book published by UBS, which no longer exists. And that very clever person was pricing the book at nearly 3,000 rupees. It was then available for, I think, 300 or 400 rupees. Voice of India has kept a similar price, and it is available on their website. Can people hear me? Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay,
We
because
can hear you. We can hear you.
I was getting an echo of my own voice. So the Voice of India has published the book, and it's a very nice cover also. It's available very much at the original price. So moving on from there, I'll say a few things. I'm just giving an overall perspective. You know, when my father passed away on July 26, 1993, he had lived a very full life, personally and professionally, and had witnessed much of contemporary history. Independence in 1947, wars with Pakistan 47-48, China 1962, Pakistan again in 65, liberation of Bangladesh in 71, the nuclear explosion, the emergency, Khalistani separatism, and the action on the Golden Temple, which resulted in the assassination of Mrs. Indira Gandhi, and later the assassination of former Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, the expulsion of Kashmiri Hindus from Kashmir, which I think is the point when Mr. Tarun Vijay came into our lives. That was very important what you fought together for the Hindus in this bitter winter of 89-90, and the apocalyptic fall of the disputed Babri structure at Ayodhya on December 6, 1992. That obliteration of such a powerful symbol of national humiliation was the most that any person could expect or hope for in that era. And so when he died a few months later, I think he had died as fulfilled as possible in his national goals. Many people have said that Girilal Jain was himself an institution, not just a journalist. He was the last of the great editors from the pre-independence generation who left an indelible mark on journalism and national life through his powerful writing. He wielded his pen as a tool to intervene in public life. It is no secret that he actively advised Mrs. Indira Gandhi at various junctures of national life. He was also among the persons who helped Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi overcome the head-on collision he had with the then President, Mr. Zerz. I would say that my father's intellectual evolution began in Hindu College, Delhi. And this was at that time imbued with the nationalist spirit. But Marxism was making inroads, as we can see from the subsequent careers of fellow students of the time. But Daddy's intellectual curiosity led him to read widely on a range of subjects, including Marxism, but he was quickly disillusioned by Arthur Koestler's expose called Darkness at Noon. And he was one of the intellectuals who took Arthur Koestler seriously because the West ignored Arthur Koestler and took Marxism seriously only when the exposure by 1984 of the, what's his name, Eric Blair, what's his real name, took place. Doesn't matter. in any case, at one stage, my father went as a student only to Pondicherry, to the ashram. And after a few months, Sri Aurobindo told him, no, you have to go back to the world. You have an earthly mission, which is very big, and you must do it. So he came back, and then he briefly was attracted by M.N. Roy, despite the critique of Marxism. And one very interesting thing I would like to share, that when M.N. Roy was dying in 1954, my father went to see him. And M.N. Roy said, you can imagine how junior my dad was professionally at that time. M.N. Roy said, Giri, I bless you with the editorship of the Times of India. This was so unimaginable, inconceivable at that time. But my father stayed in the Times of India despite getting offers from other places, because he wanted to see if this blessing will be realized. It was. Then he had been to jail in 1942 because of the nationalist movement. And then people like him, they witnessed the trauma of partition. So he was always committed to a very strong state. National security and sovereignty meant a lot to him. It was a lifelong concern. He belonged to that generation of people who read history, culture, religion, civilization, philosophy, you name it, art, architecture, culture. And they had lifelong debates on the subject. What I want to emphasize is this is the generation of people who didn't get out of college and stopped reading. Their real education began after that. And I think this is what we have to do again. And I know it's happening in society. Maybe it needs a greater boost. And of course, he was a very avid student of Hindu and Muslim thought. And I will add here personally, he said, don't do comparative religion. He said this to me. Study civilizations. It'll be richer. And I think my intellectual journey began with the study of Judaic philosophy and culture by Jewish scholars when they were investigating their own. Then I read a lot on Christianity by Christian scholars, and then moved on. So this thing of civilization rather than a narrow thing called religion is a very useful tool that we should do. And we should not do the kind of tit for tat comparative religion, which we see very often in society, especially on Twitter these days. This would be my personal opinion. Then he always believed that India's natal civilization must be the bedrock of the nation, which others have also said. And this became in his life, I think, more overt during the East Pakistan tragedy, where Hindu women were given especially brutal treatment. The whole of Bangladesh suffered, but Hindu women were identified and specially brutalized at that time. We need to recognize this. He supported India's war for Bangladesh. He supported the army action in Golden Temple. And I believe that both these actions, the impact of both these incidents drove him or attracted him towards Hindutva, what we call Hindutva today, once the BJP took up the movement, the cause of the Ram Janambhoomi temple. This was an event that we all viewed, witnessed with awe in our lifetimes. So then I would say that the Ram Janambhoomi movement for my father was a Hindu civilizational affirmation, reclamation of ascendancy in national life. And it didn't happen overnight. If we look at his writings of the late 1980s and early 1990s, he observed, as Swapan has already said, that the political economic order fashioned by Jawaharlal Nehru is collapsing. Just like its parent, Marxist, Leninist, Stalinist order had died. They were linked. Secularism and socialism had lost vigor, they had lost their shine, and non-alignment had become obsolete. So this vacuum triggered a re-Hinduization of the political domain, because nature abhors a vacuum. Something will move in when something is dying. This re-Hinduization took place. This was India's quest for Hindu Rashtra. Hindu Rashtra, he made it clear repeatedly, means Hindu polity and not Hindu nation. Because we always get attacked on this point, we have to remember. Nation is a Semitic concept. It arose in Western Europe in the 18th century after the secular forces broke away from the stranglehold of the church. Now, Christianity and Islam, because of monotheism, they rest on exclusion of people. So you have to belong to a territory, you have to belong to a race, you have to belong to a religion, and then you're in the charmed circle. Hinduism, we must remember this Hindu Dharma, Sanatana Dharma, believes in inclusion. There will never be erection of barriers and boundaries. And please remember, we always get defensive. Islamic separatism in India, especially, maybe other parts of the world, it resists inclusion. If you remember, persons of my generation may remember reading the literature growing up, there was always this, we are told there was a fear of by Muslims that they would be gobbled up by the Hindu sea around them. What does this gobbling up mean? It means that you wanted always to have barriers for your idea of self. And we didn't believe in that because everyone is different, everyone is distinct, and everyone is flowing on the ocean called Sanatana Dharma. We must remember this, we have never been aggressive or threatening to other people. And we get on the defensive as if we have been. This is wrong of us. So I would say that my father always said that despite the outward appearances, the Ram Temple movement is not a conflict of Hindus and Muslims. It is only a Hindu attempt to renew themselves in the spirit of their own civilization. Come to 2019, and we found that when the Supreme Court gave the temple to the Hindus, then there was a very calm acceptance by Muslims across the spectrum. This proves his point. In fact, many Muslims said the temple should always have been given, should have been given long ago. The funny thing here, and I'm going to conclude on this note, these Muslims in 2019, they were aware that in friendly Turkey, the Muslim leadership, the political leadership of the time, was trying to fight for getting back Hagia Sophia as a mosque. They finally succeeded on 10 July 2020, as we all know. The Congress Party, which entered the freedom struggle of the Khilafat movement of 1919, has maintained a stoic silence on this episode. But President Erdogan is going to move more rapidly now to revive his idea of caliphate by 2023. India will have to formulate a response in the harmony of our own civilizational ethos. This is the challenge before the thinkers of our generation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandhya ji, for
one more statement. I just wanted to say my father has early in life, in his professional life, he had written a few books. One of them was a very interesting title called India Meets China in Nepal. And it's become very rare. I remembered it because Nepalis are currently asking if they can get copies. I said it's out of print, but we had scanned it and put it on a dedicated website with all his works, which we have tried to. We haven't done all, but we tried to do that. So he has done that. Hindu Phenomenon was completed by Meenakshi Jain after his death and published. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing those personal experiences, as well as the intellectual insights. In fact, one important statement that struck me from one of his writings, where he said the Hindu fight is not at all with Muslims. The fight is between Hindus anxious to renew themselves in the spirit of their civilization, and the state, Indian in name and not in spirit, and the political and intellectual class trapped in the debris the British managed to bury us under before they left. Problematic, so to say, he has formulated that the real struggle is at the intellectual level, and it is with the so-called intellectual elite of India, who see India from non-Indian point of view, rather the British point of view, and we have to fight with them intellectually. Now I open the forum for questions, some additions, inputs, discussion, and maybe at the end, perhaps we would like to give a couple of minutes each to the speaker, and then conclude with some kind of resolve how to take this legacy forward. I already see one question in the chat box by Professor Baltesh Singh Maan. He has requested Swapanda to share his perspective on what should be our priorities in the midst of current pro-Hindu political power to build a vibrant Hindu media. What can be done, and how this legacy created by Girilal Ji can be taken forward? That is what he is asking, Professor Baltesh Singh Maan.
Well, thank you, Prafulla. I'm slightly skeptical of the idea of forming a Hindu media. What I think is important, however, is that the one-sided narrative which exists in the mainstream media, which is of course being challenged in different forms by, with the with various social media platforms, but it's being challenged on the margins by these institutions. In the main body of media, it is not being challenged. I think what is important is, number one, that there is a degree of even-handedness, but far more important, I think, which I think is very dangerous, which is happening now, and I keep interacting with a lot of youngsters who've come into different spheres, having studied the liberal arts and the social sciences from these universities, that they have acquired a particular form of what they consider common sense, which is so outdated and which is so tendentious that they believe that people like us are freaks. So it's to contest that common sense. And how do you contest it? I think it's very important to create a body of teachers, to create the body of intellectuals who can actually be at the place where these ideas are inculcated. Have we got enough of a literature? That's the question I'm asking. Have we got enough of literature in all languages which can be disseminated? I had a particular experience during this CA agitation and counter agitation in West Bengal. Now, you would have thought that in West Bengal, the idea of what had happened to the Hindus in erstwhile East Pakistan and subsequently Bangladesh should have become common sense, common knowledge. But no, this consistent history of denial has taken such roots that even there's something which should be an everyday experience has been thought of as something strange. So I think the task is far big. Media is, of course, a very important part of it. But I think what we have to do is, number one, fight for an even-handedness in the media in the short term. And number two, the real intellectual struggle is in the universities, in the publishing sphere, in other related activities like that, and in different languages. And this is, I think, very, very important, that literature of a sufficient variety should be available in all languages, all the Indian languages. And by doing that, I think we can begin the process once again. It's a long struggle. I have no delusions. It's not a short-term thing which you can get. कब्जा कर लो ये इंस्टीट्यूशन, ये कब्जा कर लो, इसमें नहीं होगा. इससे बहुत ज्यादा करना पड़ेगा. तो यही.
And Girilal Ji often used to write and speak about this. In fact, this emotionality and emotional outburst is not going to work. It needs a sustained effort to build up as a movement intellectually. He was fine with in fact he was happy with VHP coming forward and building this army of people on the ground. But he said, unless it is supported intellectually by some warriors, it is not going to succeed in the long run. Yes, Sandhya Ji wants to add
point I wanted to make. One great deficiency we have, which I have warned repeatedly, we need a major thing called the translation industry. Everything should be available in every language. And if we can get IT people to help in this by creating the rough draft of translation, which other people can then refine, we can do it quite speedily. This is an urgent imperative. And at every level, we need it at school level with good books, we need it at college level, we need it at the non-collegiate level of literature, translation, scripture, anything and everything. It really needs to be done on a war footing. And out of that itself, you will find a lot of new intellectual ideas will germinate and come out. This is an urgent imperative.
Thank you. I think Shan Kashyap is a history scholar from JNU. He has some question to ask. Shan, unmute yourself and ask.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the talk and namaste. With Girilal Ji, I would like to take this opportunity to mention some names. Sitaram Goel Ji, Ram Swarup Ji, Harsh Narayan, Abhas Kumar Chatterjee, K.S. Lal, Santaris Nirala, Shrikant Telagiri, Arun Shori, even Jay Dubashi, and now Swapan Dasgupta is here. And my question to Shri Swapan Dasgupta is that all these names which we saw, coming out as intellectual warriors in the last years of contemporary history, were not really guided by some kind of direct political affiliations. They were more guided by the ideation, the ideas. Many of them had a very trouble, love and hate kind of relationship with the dominant party lines. In the last few years, have we witnessed a dominant party line phenomenon sabotaging the autonomous idea line in intellectual excursions?
This is a fun question. I think it's a fun question because you're absolutely right that all the intellectuals you mentioned came into their conclusions were almost self-driven. They stumbled into particular things through their own path of discovery rather than through any organizational networks. A large number of them were Royists, actually. I mean, Giri wasn't the only one. M.N. Roy actually created an intellectual ferment in the minds of the sort of post-Marxism. If anybody is to write a post-Marxist history, the history of post-Marxism, I think M.N. Roy will have a very, very important role in this. I think he's undervalued in a lot of ways in India. Similarly, the way in which Jayaprakash Narayan shaped from his days, from his route of socialism. So these were all very, very important. Now, people like Sitaram Goel in particular, Ram Swarup was a more, he was a little more sadhu-like intellectual. But Sitaram Goel was always, never one to miss out on a fight, good fight if he could get one. And Sitaram Goel had a very, what do you call, turbulent relationship with the Sangh, for instance. I mean, in some senses, he thought, he used very colorful language to sometimes discover. But what he was really getting at was a particular tradition, which I believe existed in the Sangh for a very long time, which is basically anti-intellectualism. Now, I believe that tradition, they have very consciously sought to overcome. I believe that very genuinely. Look, it's you can say the process is not even, that there are large areas. Like I can tell you in Bengal, there is a very large anti-intellectual trend which exists in the Sangh, and I can understand why it took place. It took place because if you are confronted in a hostile environment, you tend to get defensive and retreat into your own little fort. I can understand the reasons why it's happened, but nevertheless, it is there. And there is a great deal of suspicion of people. The idea that you must get more people, you must engage with more people. That tradition is still uneven. In some parts of the country, it's there. In some parts of the country, it's not there. In some individuals, it's there. In some individuals, it's not there. So this is a very uneven process. But what I think is very important is that we create the conditions whereby even if the route of self-discovery is welcomed in an institutional, political, everywhere, the political parties, etc., actually have a culture of having a big banyan tree approach, a big open umbrella approach, whereby all of these people can come in. And that engagement can take place in a more friendlier atmosphere. When that happens, I think a lot of progress is there. I mean, the idea of what constitutes, if you look at what constitutes Hindu nationalism, and I tried to bring it out in a book, and you'll see so many differences out. So many. I mean, between Tilak on one hand, Bhandarkar and and of course Gokhale and Tilak, we know the differences. But why? What were the roots of it? What their attitude, where there were large degrees of commonality. So the sheer complexity, the sheer range, when you are talking about Hindu nationalism, we are talking about a vast expanse. We are not talking about just one stream only. We are not talking about one political tendency. We are talking about a much, much bigger thing. And I think that the hugeness, the how big the enterprise is, we have to keep that in mind always and not get carried away by this very Marxist habit. You see, within Marxism, you will find, why are there so many Marxist sects and subsects and so many things like that? Because each of them believe that they are the true interpreters of Lenin. You often hear them saying, Marx himself said, or Lenin himself said. So that sort of theology is, I think, very alien to our Hindu tradition. And I think we should discourage that and have that larger, expansive network and approach.
Thank you. This is an interesting question, and I often confront this while interacting with intellectuals. I think collective as an organization you always find it difficult for intellectuals, because intellectuals have their own space and one should respect that. My experience is, with RSS, that has been there, but intellectuals find it very difficult to go along and to walk along. So this has been a relationship, but this political affiliation, I think Tarunji is a better person. Where is this thin line? Because you must have experienced, Tarunji, the same thing. I experience the same thing often, and I object to it, because whenever I'm called to speak somewhere, and either in media or any other platform, first they frame me, brand it as, either editor of RSS mouthpiece or ideologue, even though I never claimed that, neither RSS ever said so. And then, but a Marxist, known Marxist leanings journalist will be introduced as a senior journalist, an independent thinker, an analyst, and this is played very cleverly. So what Shan was asking is, to take the legacy of Girilal Jain or similar kind of people forward, what should be that thin line that we should follow? Because you have been this side of the spectrum as well as in the political party as a member of parliament. So how do you see this dilemma?
Prabhuji, we have passed through the worst kind of a political and ideological apartheid that one could have in his lifetime. Our columns were stopped, and when editor started publishing my columns, he was opposed tooth and nail by his own colleagues. This was a thing that when nobody spoke about us, nobody wanted to write about us, nobody even wanted to have the news published about us unless it's twisted on the news desk. I think the first journalist who wrote about us when Panchajanya crossed 1 lakh circulation uh, during Ayodhya movement, and that was all agency sale and not a subscription sale. So the first journalist who wrote about us was Swapan Dasgupta in Sunday column. Uh, his column began with us, began with my name and Panchajanya, how we are doing it. Otherwise, we were the most untouchables in the mainline journalism, and it's still like Editors Guild. They never allowed us, even in PIB, never gave us a membership. It was after a lot of struggle, then editor Panchajanya, I got the PIB card. So that was the condition prevailing in those times when we would write, and we would write in many newspapers. But the thing that Girilal Ji and the thing that Sudarshan Ji also agree was that the fight for the Hindu civilizational cause must be beyond the party lines. It cannot be a BJP a fight. It cannot be a struggle only for by those who support a particular party or particular organization. It has to be all encompassing, and it must be taken up in national Indian languages. And here is what we are not succeeding. Uh, what we see in other languages also, wherever there is a Hindu cause, Hindu movement, Hindu intellectuals are gathering, they finally come in under the shadow of English language, and all the public dialogue, intellectual dialogue, it has to be recognizable, it has to be of some certain stature. They think that it has to be in English. The fight has to be taken up through Indian national language. Where is the Assamese intellectual debate? Where is the Tamil intellectual debate? Where is the Gujarati intellectual debate? Where is the Bengali intellectual debate among the Bengalis in Bengali language? That is where we are lacking, and it must be beyond the party lines. We must be able to recognize that there were people in the Congress who were in touch with the RSS stalwarts, who were touching with us, who were writing for Panchajanya while they were holding positions in the Congress party, and they were writing very, very clearly for the Hindu cause. Shri Chaturvedi is a member of parliament of Congress from Kanpur, and there were several other people, and we would publish all those views without any or change. So that movement has to be built up, that movement which is not a party supported movement. That is not a party's movement, that's not a political party's domain, but that has people from all shades and walks of life who may not supporting a particular party, but they may be very, very clearly in an undiluted and uncompromising way supporting the Hindu cause. If we can work on that, that will be a great day for this new Hindu rise. The new Hindu must work beyond the party lines, and that must be the aim. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any question, or I will just give a couple of minutes each to Raji?
जी जी जी
Any question, anything to add for the future course? Otherwise, I'll ask Sandhya ji and Ken Gupta ji to make their concluding remarks.
प्रफुल्ल जी, मैं आखिर में 2 मिनट बोलूं तो चलेगा?
जी 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 बिल्कुल, वैसे भी
क्या
आपको
क्या
मैं देने ही वाला हूँ मंच।
नहीं तो मैं अभी बोल ही देता हूँ, 1997 में गिरिलाल जैन जी के मेमोरी में एक लेक्चर हुआ था पार्लियामेंट अनेक्सी में 26 जुलाई को, जिसको देवेंद्र जी ने ऑर्गेनाइज किया था। अरुण शौरी जी का लेक्चर हुआ था और अटल जी ने उसमें प्रिजाइड किया था। मैं भी उस कार्यक्रम में था और उस कार्यक्रम के समय जो गिरिलाल जी के बारे में एक फोल्डर बांटा गया था, वो फोल्डर मेरे पास अभी भी है। मुझे वो दिन याद रहा और मैंने 6 साल बाद ये कोशिश की कि गिरिलाल जैन जी की मेमोरी को इस तरह से अलाइव रखा जाए, क्योंकि 97 में जो प्रोग्राम हुआ उसके बाद दोबारा वो कार्यक्रम नहीं हो पाया। वो देवेंद्र जी का ही सारा एफर्ट था, उसमें मेरा कोई रोल नहीं था। लेकिन 6 साल बाद 2003 में मैंने एफर्ट किया और एक बड़ी मॉडेस्ट किस्म का स्वाध्याय मंडल दीनदयाल शोध संस्थान में हुआ 2003 25 जुलाई को, जिसमें मीनाक्षी जी को हमने बुलाया और उनके सामने विषय रखा गिरिलाल जैन का अधूरा कार्य। ये 2003 की बात है। बाद में अगले 2 साल मैं इस कोशिश में रहा कि गिरिलाल जैन जी की मेमोरी को ऑर्गेनाइजर या भारत प्रकाशन इसको उसको मेमोरी को अलाइव रखने के लिए भारत प्रकाशन अपने ऊपर जिम्मेदारी ले, और मैं उसमें गिरिलाल जैन जी के बारे में सफल नहीं हो पाया। हालांकि 2005 में मलकानी जी के मेमोरी में एक कार्यक्रम भारत प्रकाशन की तरफ से हुआ। हम ध्यान रखें कि मलकानी जी का भी अभी बर्थ सेंटिनरी ईयर आने वाला है और मलकानी जी गिरिलाल जी से कुछ महीने ही बड़े थे। तो 2005 का ये एफर्ट करने के बाद फिर गाड़ी आगे नहीं बढ़ी और वो रुक गई। ये चांस की बात है कि अभी 30 जून को मैं अपने पुराने कागज देख रहा था तो मुझे वो 97 का फोल्डर मिल गया। 2003 में जो कार्यक्रम हुआ था उसका इनविटेशन मिल गया। 2004 और 2005 में जो मलकानी जी की मेमोरी में प्रोग्राम्स हुए थे वो सब रिकॉर्ड मुझे मिल गया और मुझे लगा कि जो उस समय मैंने एफर्ट किया था मैं उसको दोबारा रिवाइव करूं। तो मैंने इमीडिएटली प्रफुल्ल जी से संपर्क किया और मुझे बहुत ही आनंद हुआ जब प्रफुल्ल जी ने इंस्टेंटली मेरे से एग्री किया और उन्होंने कहा कि मलकानी जी की सेंटिनरी के लिए तो वो ऑलरेडी कुछ प्लान कर रहे हैं। तो मैंने गिरिलाल जी के बारे में कहा तो इमीडिएटली उन्होंने इसके लिए भी एग्री किया। तब मेरे मन में टारगेट आज की डेट थी कि उनका जन्मदिन आने वाला है। आज वो होते तो 98 के हुए होते, तो अभी 2 साल पड़े हैं उनके 100 साल पूरे होने में, और अगर 100 साल पूरे होने के बाद सेंटिनरी मनाई जाए तो 1 साल और मिलने वाला है। तो ऐसे कहें तो आज से हमको 3 साल मिलने वाले हैं अगर हम उनकी कोई सेंटिनरी का प्लान बनाएंगे तो। मैं तो इसमें पूरा अपना सहयोग देना ही चाहूँगा, और इसमें अगर भारत प्रकाशन फ्रंट में आता है तो ये बहुत ही अप्रोप्रिएट होगा। ऑलरेडी भारत प्रकाशन मलकानी जी के बारे में सोच ही रहा है। मेरा मलकानी जी के साथ व्यक्तिगत बहुत नज़दीकी संबंध आया था, तो मुझे ये भी लगता है कि भारत प्रकाशन 2 वेटरन जर्नलिस्ट के बारे में, क्योंकि बहुत सारे लोगों के केसेस नहीं लिए जा सकते, लेकिन एक गिरिलाल जी के बारे में और एक मलकानी जी के बारे में, यदि 2 के बारे में भारत प्रकाशन कोई अपने ऊपर जिम्मेदारी लेता है और दोनों की ही सेंटिनरी आ रही है, तो उस सेंटिनरी में बिफिटिंग तरीके से उसको मनाया जाए तो अच्छा रहेगा। और ये जो इंटेलेक्चुअल डिस्कोर्स की बात आई है, मैं तो एक बहुत ही एकदम छोटे से स्केल पर जिज्ञासा के माध्यम से उसको पूरा करने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ। जिज्ञासा की स्थापना करीब सन 2000 में हुई थी, बाबूराव वैद्य जी ने की थी। 2008 तक जिज्ञासा जैसे कैसे चलता रहा, बंद हो गया, और 2017 मई से जिज्ञासा फिर से रिवाइव हुआ है। मैं ये भी जानता हूँ कि दिल्ली में और भी कई प्लेटफॉर्म्स हैं, केवल जिज्ञासा ही नहीं है, लेकिन मैं ये भी मानता हूँ कि जिज्ञासा या ऐसे और बहुत सारे प्लेटफॉर्म्स की ज़रूरत है, और उन प्लेटफॉर्म्स के थ्रू जो भी इंटेलेक्चुअल काम होना है, और मैं भी मानता हूँ कि बहुत ज़्यादा काम अभी होना बाकी है, तो ये जो इंटेलेक्चुअल काम होना है ये आगे बढ़े, पर्टिकुलरली गिरिलाल जी की मेमोरी में और मलकानी जी की मेमोरी में जो होना है उसको भारत प्रकाशन करेगा, तो मेरे लिए तो ये बहुत ही आनंद का विषय होगा। मैं यहीं अपनी बात रोक रहा हूँ। धन्यवाद।
धन्यवाद, धन्यवाद राज जी। आपके निरंतर एक तरीके से प्रयासों से आपने इस विषय को परस्यू किया, इसकी वजह से आज ये हम कर पाए। गुप्ता जी, आपको कोई अंत में जो उसमें कोई कुछ यू लाइक टू ऐड समथिंग?
गिरिलाल जी के विषय में
एटमॉस्फेयर इन मीडिया एंड हाउ टू टेक दैट लीगेसी फॉरवर्ड।
अच्छा, इसमें तो ऐसा है कि आज भी मैं बात कर रहा था कि हमारे लोग, हमारे मित्र संस्थाओं में भाग नहीं लेते हैं। अब एडिटर्स गिल्ड पर हम कहते हैं, अब एडिटर्स जो हमारे हैं उनको उसमें भाग लेना चाहिए, तो दूसरे जो एडिटर्स हैं वो आगे निकल जाते हैं, उनको सपोर्ट होती है, मैं जानता हूँ, कभी बाहर से होती है, नॉर्वे से होती है, कहाँ से होती है, वो सब हम लोगों को पता है, लेकिन हम लोग भाग नहीं लेते। जैसा हमने बताया कि हमारे यूनियन के बारे में, कि उस समय हम लोग पीछे रह जाते थे। अभी आपने बताया कि पीआईबी में एक्रेडिटेशन नहीं होता था। अब ये सब चीज़ें क्यों नहीं होती थी? क्योंकि सत्यनारायण जी बंसल भारत प्रकाशन के मैनेजिंग डायरेक्टर थे,
एमडी थे। हाँ,
तो उनसे मैंने ये रिक्वेस्ट की, क्योंकि वो हमारे कॉन्टेम्परेरी थे, सीनियर्स थे, तो उन्होंने कहा भाई सबको मेंबर बनाओ, और उन्होंने यहाँ तक कहा कि भारत प्रकाशन इसकी सबकी वो कर देगा। तो मलकानी जी भी IFWJ के मेंबर बने, प्रेस क्लब के मेंबर बने। इसी तरीके से मेरा कहना है कि जब तक आप संस्थाओं में सब में भाग नहीं लेंगे तो ये जरा संभव नहीं, और अगर लेंगे तो ये कैसे कह सकते हैं कि ऑर्गेनाइजर को या 500 जनवरी को नहीं मिला। एक्रेडिटेशन कमेटी जो बनती है वो ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस की सपोर्ट से मिलती है, जर्नलिस्ट के सपोर्ट से। तो हमारे प्रेस एसोसिएशन में या जर्नलिस्ट यूनियंस में अगर मेंबर नहीं होंगे या हमारा उसमें भाग नहीं होगा तो हम पीछे रह जाएंगे। इसलिए मेरा इसमें यही कहना है कि हमको खुलकर भाग लेना चाहिए, और कई बार प्रश्न होता है कि प्रेस है ये प्रेस क्लब, अब प्रेस क्लब भी तो हम ही लोगों के लिए है ना, और आज थोड़ी बनी है, कब से बनी है, मनकेकर साहब के जमाने में बनी थी, तो कितने लोग आए, कितने लोग चले गए, लेकिन अब उसमें एक वर्ग क्यों है, उसका कारण है कि वो सपोर्ट करते हैं उसको, बाहर से सपोर्ट आती है और इस तरीके से वो बन जाते हैं। तो हम लोगों को कलेक्टिवली मेंबर बनना चाहिए, भाग लेना चाहिए एक्टिवली, तो ये दिक्कत नहीं आएगी, ये मुझे कहना।
Sandhya ji, because you had already taken one effort to bring, the collective, writings of Girilal Ji on one platform, and perhaps, in next year or so, we can, subject-wise, we can club them, and I would definitely like to take that thing forward. So anything you would like to add about this?
I just support Gupta ji. There is a dominance of the cultural Marxists in the media, academics, and in fact everywhere. And our governments, we have had, I think, this is NDA 3, what we will call, we have done nothing to mitigate anything in that direction. So I don't think anything like creating an institution for this or that specifically is going to work. We are trying to put all the writings on this website called girilaljainarchive.net. And they are free for everyone to read and do what they have to. Swapanja is totally right that it takes time and perspective to get a full grip on things. And the M.N. Roy point, I take it very well. I've not met any other Royists in the media so far. Actually, I didn't know who they were, if they were. So these are things that will come out with time. What we do need to do is to encourage people to keep studying whatever they can, whenever they can, as a lifelong thing. And within the institutions that exist, which give scholarships and things, we can encourage scholarships. Overnight, nothing is going to turn. And I'll give you one example. After 2019, we had a citizenship bill, which was to provide succor to Hindu victims of the partition. And we saw after that what happened. There was, I won't blame one community, but I will blame one ideology for being at the back of this. And it is the Marxist hand in everything can be seen. We have not done enough to tackle that. And these are the real challenges of today. Turkey, I want to emphasize, is well entrenched in our country and we don't know it. This is a warning. We have to look, remember the past, study it, and move forward and apply it to the present. These are the real challenges. I think there's a real mismatch in our society today on these issues. And it requires deeper thinking from all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And with this, we will close this session. But as Rajkumar Bhatia ji said, I assure you, Bhatia ji, in next couple of years, we will certainly, and not just in terms of program, but institutionalizing something in the memory of Girilal Jain ji and Malkani ji. Because I believe that these are the, we have to carry forward the legacy and establish them as icons for the younger generation. So their work has to come forward, and in fact their work needs to be taken forward by somebody, because both of them created space in a much more hostile atmosphere than what we are facing today. And if they could do so then, we can definitely do it today. And Organizer Panchajanya is perhaps the best institutionalization process that can happen. These are the two weeklies who can take it forward. I thank Swapanda for taking out time to. I also thank Tarunji for sharing those personal experiences. Ken Gupta ji, I approached him a bit late, though I was in contact with Munish ji. Ken sir have written for Organizer, but we were after a long time. I chatted with him a couple of days back, and he kindly agreed. In fact, day long today also he had some session with Journalist Association, but he uh, chose to join at sharp at 4 o'clock with us. So thank you, Ken Gupta, and of course Sandhya ji, thank you. You have been great support in organizing this event, and of course thank you Rajji and the entire team of Jigyasa for collaborating in this endeavor. I promise and assure you that this is just a beginning. In the memory of Girilal Ji, we will take the legacy of Hindu phenomena forward, and it will be an intellectual exercise for institutionalization process, at least at the Bharat Prakashan level. I can't assure you at the government level, but at the Bharat Prakashan level, and we will create this as a kind of inspiration for the younger generation to take the baton forward. So thank you, thanks a lot for
Thank you.
participating, all
Thank
the
you, Prafulji,
participants,
Rajji. Wonderful.
and I hope we will bring out something, some ideas, brainstorm on this, and we will take it forward. Thank you, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
जिज्ञासा की ओर से सबको धन्यवाद।
आपको भी बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद राज जी।